All right, good evening, everyone. I'm just going to give it a moment for everyone to get invited and into the webinar space. All right. Our numbers are still going up, so I'm welcome. Welcome, everyone. I should have had talking points prepared. I will say my computer stopped working within the last half hour, so I am joining from my phone. So I appreciate everyone's patience tonight as I manage that. All right. I think we're at a pretty good number, so I might as well get started. Good evening, everyone. My name is Tate White. My pronouns are she, they, and I am a strategic project manager supporting the City of Portland's transition. I think we're at about 30, which seems like a good number. So I'm here tonight with several of my colleagues who will be helping to facilitate and answer questions. Thank you to Diana Shiplet, Julia Meyer, and Nicole Forbes for this work and all that you do. I encourage you to introduce yourselves at any time tonight. Our focus for tonight will be on the City Council organization and procedures and how they will change to support the mayor-council form of government. I will present for about 20 minutes, and then we will have the rest of our time together to answer questions, which we will talk about more on the next logistics slide. So next slide, please. I am going to take a moment to go over some meeting logistics before we get started with the presentation. This is a virtual meeting, and it's being recorded for later viewing. A copy of this recording will be posted on the city's transition webpage under past meetings and events. We have closed captioning, American Sign Language, and Spanish interpretation available tonight. To access Spanish interpretation, please click on the globe icon at the bottom right of your screen and select Spanish. To access closed captioning, click on the CC button on the bottom right side of your screen. We have the Zoom Q&A feature available. Please feel free to submit questions or comments through there. We may not be able to answer all of the questions today, but they will become part of the meeting record that we will follow up on. And I encourage you to upvote any questions that you also have. At the end of the presentation, we will provide information about how you can submit comment to us after tonight and how you can submit testimony to City Council. Next slide, please. So for some background for those of you who might be new to the conversation, in November 2022, Portlanders voted to change city government in 3 significant ways. First, allowing voters to rank candidates in order of their preference by using ranked choice voting. Second, creating 4 new districts with 3 members elected to represent each district, expanding the City Council to a total of 12 members. And third, replacing the commission form of government with the mayor-council form. The City Council will focus on setting policy, and a mayor elected citywide will run the city's day-to-day operations with the help of a professional city administrator. Our understanding is that voters approve these charter amendments to make Portland's government more accountable, transparent, responsive, and representative of every area of our city. Clear roles and responsibilities at the leadership level will promote accountability, transparency, and responsiveness in our decision-making. Our team is currently working to plan for and provide the structural policy and process changes required to align with these new roles and set the 2025 leadership up for success. The code chapter updates we are speaking about tonight are one piece of this work. Next slide, please. So in support of providing more clarity on these shifting roles, let's talk about what will be different under the new mayor-council structure. City councilors will no longer directly oversee city bureaus. Council will focus on setting policies to achieve desired community outcomes. Councilors will also be elected by district and not citywide. They will develop policies and standards that establish the parameters for running Portland's government. They will work with fellow councilors in the community to develop laws addressing policy priorities. The mayor will no longer sit on council, and unlike councilors, will be elected citywide. Future mayors will appoint and council will confirm a professional city administrator. The mayor and city administrator will work together to implement the laws and policies developed by council and will manage all city bureaus. Structurally, all 26 bureaus and offices will be under the oversight of the city administrator. We are researching best practices in peer cities and talking to subject matter experts internally and externally to the city to determine options and recommendations for creating a framework for the future city council and mayor to operate successfully under this new system. Clarity about the roles and responsibilities of council, the mayor, and city administrator are needed now to help city staff, the public, and interested candidates prepare for the mayor-council form of government that will start on January 1st, 2025. Next slide, please. So before we dig into the council organization and procedure code updates, I wanted to share a little bit about the Government Transition Advisory Committee, or GTAC for short. So I believe we're lucky to have many members here with us tonight, enough to represent a quorum. So just wanted to let you know that for your awareness. This 15-member body was appointed by the mayor and approved by City Council in March 2023. And they will serve for the duration of the transition until March 2025. The primary roles of the committee are to ensure implementation is effective and efficient, to serve as the main public engagement body for the transition, and to provide strategic advice to the city. And while GTAC is representative of Portland, we know that engaging Portlanders is key to this transition's success. And so we really encourage interested Portlanders to reach out to attend GTAC meetings, submit public comment, or request a briefing or presentation with committee members. Their webpage is www.portland.gov/transition/advisory. I'd like to personally thank GTAC members for all the great advice that they've provided to this team over the last several months to help get us to where we are tonight with the code updates we're talking about. All right, so now let's talk about City Code 3.02 on council organization and procedure. We are approaching this work in 2 phases. In September of this year, we will be bringing an update to the code chapter to City Council. This year's update is focused on matching this code with the revised city charter, so the 2025 City Council can hold its first meeting and elect its first council president at the start of 2025. The transition team prioritized this code update so that anyone wishing to run for office in November of 2024 can understand how council will operate in this new form of government. The second phase of this work is to identify, research, and provide recommendations for additional process improvements, procedures, or organizational structures for the 2025 City Council to consider. Further engagement on additional code revisions and phase 2 recommendations will happen in 2024. All right, so this slide shows our current timeline. You can see an overview of meetings we have had with internal subject matter experts, commissioner offices, and the Government Transition Advisory Committee. You can see a star marking our listening session tonight to answer questions and take feedback. We will be meeting again with the Government Transition Advisory Committee on August 14th to discuss what we've heard, and we'll incorporate that feedback where we can into either the draft code or in future recommendations. We plan to take City Code Chapter 3.02 to Council on September 20th later this year. In the preceding months, we will continue to engage with the community and experts from other cities on potential additional recommendations for the 2025 City Council to consider. Now we would like to talk to you about some of the policy choices we have currently included in the draft code update, as well as example topics we can dive deeper into for phase 2. So moving on to the policy choices, for our first one, the new city charter requires that a council president be elected at the first meeting of the year and that they preside over council meetings. However, the charter doesn't outline any other duties for the council president, which is something that's common for other peer cities with mayor-council forms of government. The first policy choice, thus made in the draft update to Code 3.02, asked what other duties should be delegated to the president and what duties should be retained by council. By charter, the city auditor is required to produce an agenda for all council meetings. Our recommendation is that the council president work with the city auditor to finalize the meeting agenda, including reviewing all items and recommending whether the item should be considered immediately by the full council or referred to a committee. This ensures that the city auditor has one point of contact for city council agenda issues rather than 12. The council president could also assign seats at the dais, sign items approved by council when necessary, and serve as the primary point of contact between the mayor and the city council. Having the president take on these responsibilities ensures that there is accountability and a clear decision maker for these core operational needs. However, we recommend that the full council make decisions around committees, such as what committees should be created, who should be appointed to them, and what matters should be referred to those committees. Having council make these decisions both helps councilors to develop working relationships across districts and ensures that a majority of councilors are involved in determining policy priorities. We felt that this balance of power was particularly important, given that the council president will be elected from a district and not citywide. So for the second policy choice, it asks if the council meeting schedule needs to be altered. Currently, City Council meets Wednesdays at 9:30 a.m. and as necessary Wednesday or Thursday afternoon. The 2025 council will be largely new and needs to meet in full to develop good working relationships and a shared understanding of their roles as councilors. In the first 6 months of their terms, the 2025 councilors will need to work together to complete the first budget process in the new form of government. They will also need to work together to establish policy priorities and the smaller committees that will focus on those areas. Therefore, we are proposing establishing a minimum number of meetings per month for council, with the understanding that they can meet more frequently if necessary. We are recommending that at least one of these meetings be required to be at night, since evening meetings increase accessibility and equity of access to council for community members that work during the day. It will be important for the schedule of council meetings to allow for the timely flow of legislation between council and committees and increase public engagement. So we recommend the future council track the effectiveness of the cadence of their full and committee meetings and consider making any necessary adjustments to that schedule. So the third policy choice is about voting requirements for council decisions. The charter explicitly outlines many council voting requirements. However, there are a few which are not set by charter, but we think should be clearly outlined so council can do its business effectively. Here are the council vote requirements on the next slide, please, laid out in the city charter. We cannot change these requirements without a charter amendment that's approved by Portland voters. And then the next slide shows us that these are council actions that are not defined in the charter, but we feel necessary to include in the revised chapter 3.02. Oh, next slide, please. So council, staff, and community members understand what votes are required for common council actions. For any actions not defined in chapter 3.02, the council could use Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised, which is standard practice for most cities across the country. There are two policy choices we did not include in the revised chapter. The first is how council should handle tie votes in committees, and the second is the formal process for requesting that the mayor come to break a tie vote. We did not define these because we believe that they are best left for the 2025 council to come to agreement on. And then for the next slide, the final policy choices made for the draft chapter relate to how council meetings are managed, in what ways they may need to be altered. As we have discussed, many new councilors will begin office for the first time ever and under a new form of government. Having some basic structure and rules of procedure in place will support council's success, particularly in the first few meetings as councilors learn meeting processes and requirements. On the next slide, you can see 3 fundamental council actions we identified as helpful to define and code to provide a framework under which council can operate in 2025. Although once elected, the council president will preside over council. It is not clear who will preside over council in advance of that crucial vote at the first meeting of each new year. We are proposing that the council clerk, with assistance of legal counsel, act as presiding officer until the council president and vice president are elected. Currently, voting order goes by commissioner number, rotated quarterly, with the mayor always voting last. Since we will have 12 councilors elected from 4 districts, voting order gets a little more complicated. After evaluating a few different options, we are recommending that votes be called by district in numerical order and by alphabetical order of last names of councilors in those districts. Each quarter, the beginning district is rotated to the end, and the presiding officer, typically the council president or vice president, will vote last. Finally, to balance the council president's authority in helping to finalize the agenda with the city auditor, we are recommending that a majority present approve the agenda at the start of the meeting. The majority may agree to reorder the agenda or add an item to the next meeting's agenda. Next slide, please. The process for when the mayor would be expected to attend council meetings, such as for giving the annual state of the city, presenting their proposed budget, proclamations or ceremonial resolutions, is another area we think best determined by the 2025 council. We plan on doing further research, taking public input, and working with the Government Transition Advisory Committee to provide a recommendation for this process for the future council to consider. So in chapter 3.02, we have 3 policy choices that we hadn't finalized just yet, but we've been working with the Government Transition Advisory Committee members who met with us a couple of weeks ago to give their thoughts and input on these choices, which was very helpful. The first choice is regarding who should be able to submit items to the council agenda. The committee suggested that any councilor should be able to submit an item. This also means that the mayor can also submit any item as they are given the same authority to do so in the amended charter. It's possible committees or the full council may end up spending time considering items which do not have support from other councilors. This will allow for such items to be discussed in a public forum with the opportunity for public input, even if an item doesn't initially appear to have support in council. The second choice is regarding whether the council president has the authority to delay a submitted item. In general, we have agreed that it's not a bad thing for the president to have this level of agenda control, particularly given that a majority of council is able to add items to a future agenda when they approve the agenda at the start of each regular meeting. The third policy choice from the recent discussion with GTAC members relates to whether the full council can pull an item out of a committee for consideration. We agree with the input from GTAC that this is, or GTAC members, that this is important to include so that the council is able to address items in a timely manner. Next slide, please. So here's a reminder of our next steps. We are meeting with the Government Transition Advisory Committee on August 14th, next week, to talk about what we've heard tonight and any recommended edits to the draft code. We expect to present the next iteration of the code for first reading at City Council on September 20th. And finally, we plan to continue working towards developing a set of additional recommendations for consideration by the 2025 Council with your input as part of phase 2 of this work. And next slide, please. Finally, here are a few of the topics we see as potential priorities for additional research and community input over 2024 to inform these phase 2 recommendations. Please let us know if you have any thoughts on these topics or any suggestions for additional topics that you think we should be considering through this work. That completes my presentation. Huge thank you for your patience and your time listening. I'll leave this slide up for a bit longer for you to process and pass it over to my colleagues to highlight some of the questions from the chat.
Good evening. My name is Nicole Forbes. I use she, her pronouns. I am a part of the transition team as a transition project coordinator. I'm going to review some of the questions that we have already answered to give folks a moment to think through any questions, comments that you have. Please put those in the question and answer box that you'll see either at the bottom of your screen or you can access on your mobile device by clicking on those 3 parallel dots. And then it'll open up another section, and then there'll be a question and answer that should, a Q&A that should pop up where you can put in your questions and answers. We've had a question already this evening about what other cities in the US, so not quite about council procedures, but a great question this evening. What other cities the size of Portland under ranked choice voting are using a district council structure? Other examples that are using this structure include with multi-winner council seats, include Cambridge, Massachusetts, East Point, Michigan, and Palm Desert, California. For questions outside of the council procedures this evening, feel free to contact us at transition@portlandoregon.gov. And we are very happy to answer all sorts of questions related to every aspect of the transition of the city government that we are currently undergoing here in Portland. Another person asked if we're going to put a link to the slide deck in the chat. We will be posting this presentation, so this recording that we're doing this evening, on our event page tomorrow. You'll be able to find that either on the Office of I forget if you YouTube, pardon me on my moment of forgetting. Office of the Chief Administrator. If you under the City of Portland YouTube page, and we posted there. We will also have a link if you go to transition portlandoregon.gov/transition and you go to our events page. If you click on the past events section, you'll find our meeting this evening. You'll find all of the evening meetings that we've had throughout, many evening meetings we've had throughout the last couple of months. You'll find all of the links where you can watch those on YouTube. You'll find all of the documentation around those meetings. So apologies again that we don't have that in the moment, but we do have those posted on all of our past event links and on our YouTube page. If for some reason you can't find us, find that information and you're like, I don't know how to navigate this, also feel free to email us at transition@portlandoregon.gov. And we are happy to send those links your way. We're very good at finding those. Okay, and then, okay. Someone is also asking, thank you, Pamela, around the prior GTAC advice on code changes. Is that available in written format? If you take a look at the GTAC meetings, again, on that past events page on our website, you will be able to see those meeting summaries and also be able to watch previous meetings of the Government Transition Advisory Committee. Again, if you can't find those, feel free to reach out to us either via email or on the transition website. And then we're going to try and post again the slide deck as fast as we can tomorrow morning. And so keep posted. Also, you can send us an email. We'll let you know as soon as we're able to get that posted, either later tonight or tomorrow. Sometimes we fight with YouTube on getting our videos uploaded and captioned, and it takes a couple tries. So we're going to try and get that to folks as fast as we can. So I'm going to stop my recap for the moment. So it looks like those are all of our answered questions, and move over to some of the open questions that we have that folks have put in. Please continue to put in questions this evening as we answer them live, as we do written answers. I will try and recap some of those already answered questions for folks this evening. Taking a pause and a quick water break. Thank you. Okay, our first question that I'm seeing this evening, and feel free, folks, Tate, I think this is for you, but if anyone else on the call has a response, feel free to chime in. Have you considered how individual counselors will relay constituent concerns to the mayor and city administrator in our new form of government?
That's a fantastic question. Whoever asked that. Yes, part of us learning about and clarifying roles and responsibilities is thinking how the legislative counselors and the executive mayor are going to collaborate with each other and work together. And so even though there's kind of like defined focuses of their work, it's going to be important for them to have overlap on key issues like that. So, and thinking about, their, facilities planning for where they'll be working, but also thinking about planning for the staffing that will support them. We're taking all these things into consideration to make sure we have, established people and means through which they can communicate and work together to do things like pass on those constituent relations. Also, we'll mention that the charter, encourages that the city administrator attend whatever meetings of city council as they desire. And then you also have those built-in touch points with the mayor attending meetings to present on the state of the city or for various reasons. And that's one reason we've kind of highlighted that that interaction between the mayor and council meetings as something that we want to continue to talk about, because that seems to be a really, really key touch point for them. So I hope that answers the question.
And Fred, who answered that question, thank you. If there's a follow-up, feel free to put that in the Q&A as well. Okay, we have a next question from William, who says, thank you for the presentation and discussion this evening. This is not an additional policy question, one of city organization and its 26 offices and bureaus. How best can folks provide comments and advice before city staff presents an organization, draft organization to council on September 20th? And I believe that the code 3.02 in that draft organization is going to council on September 20th. And what William is talking about is the draft organization, and that is going to council, I believe, in October. If someone else knows the date, please
19th,
feel free.
yeah.
I think it's the 19th. So it's a separate city council session. How best can folks provide comments on that to city council, that sort of separate city organization work? And I believe Diana, I was going to pass that one to you.
Sure, happy to. Hello, everyone. I'm Diana Shiplet. I use she, her pronouns. And apologies, I've got some intense sun going on here at the moment, so I'm leaning in a little close here. Yeah, so there are many ways you can provide input on that. You can email our transition inbox, which is transition@portlandoregon.gov. Or you can submit comments to council when that item comes to council. You can also provide input to the GTAC meetings whenever they have public comment on it. They are always great at passing information along to all of the transition team. So those are just a couple of the ways that you can do it. You can always reach out to any of the transition team members. We're happy to pass that along as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Diana. Appreciations. We have another question from the chat around who can run for office. Are people who have been on the transition committee or any other advisory body, either within the city at all, are they able to run for office, having been on that committee or any other committee? Are they able to run for office in 2024?
My understanding is yes, there's nothing currently preventing them to run for office. And Julia, feel free to add to that if
Thanks. I did unmute. Good evening, everyone. I'm so glad folks are here. My name is Julia Meyer. I use she, her pronouns, and I serve on the transition team. Really common question. And the qualifications for who can and cannot run for office is set in our city's charter or our constitution. And there are no provisions about whether or not you served on any committee in the past. And the only way that you can add restrictions on who can run for office in the city is by changing our city's constitution, which is up to the people of Portland to vote on. Great question. Thanks.
Thanks, Julia.
Yeah, thank you. We have a question in particular around the reasoning behind adopting these elements this fall. We know that we've discussed it with GTAC and previous member, the member of GTAC. Thank you, Terry, for asking this question. It seems to me like, why are we doing some of this adoption now and then another set of adoption later? It seems to me that there's nothing particular in Code 3.02 revisions that can't wait until next year. T, can you talk more about that thinking around the timing of the two sections or the two approaches around Code 3.02?
Well, we saw this as an opportunity to really clarify these new roles and responsibilities for council and provide like clarity on council operations and a structure for them to operate in advance of folks being able to register to run this fall and November. It's helpful for people to understand what the roles of council will be in order to do that. And so there's a lot of work ahead, and the primary objective of updating this code now was to make it align with charter. It's also provided an opportunity for us to really think about these important questions about council operations so that it can influence other elements like facilities planning. And it helps just get us ahead of thinking about what is the structure that the city councilors will need to operate successfully starting in January 2025. And it will be part of, hopefully a level of candidate education, public education, voter education. Like, it's just good to have these things out there to get candidates and future incumbents really familiar with what their roles will be and hopefully set them up for success. And Diana, feel free to add anything that you think I've missed.
No, I think you're right. The biggest factor is making sure that candidates have as much education as they possibly can before they run. I do also think that it has helped us as we begin to have the real conversations about staffing levels, to begin to understand how much staff is going to be necessary for council, how much staff is going to be necessary for the council clerk's office. And as we continue to have those discussions and narrow in on all of the choices, it's important to get some of the details of the 3.02 out of the way before we dive into the much more challenging policy choices and recommendations. And to be clear, we aren't intending to revise 3.02 again before the new council starts. We are intending that any recommendations go to council as a recommendation packet that might not be codified, but might be something that they keep in their as like a set of rules that they can follow or agree to, and that they might consider codifying later, but we aren't intending to codify now and then codify again in another year. That's not the intention of having a second set of recommendations.
Great, thank you. We have a question here that's looking into the future. As we transition to this work, as we transition to working under a mayor and city administrator, do we know yet if the background or resume of the appointee for the city administrator will be made public? Also, this may be a question if the folks on, because we don't have Mike Jordan, the Chief Administrative Office, on the call this evening. I'm also happy to follow up with this person, but I wanted to check with the folks on this call to see if we know that in advance.
I don't know that we know the answer to that in advance. However, it's duly noted that there is much interest in that appointment process. And I do know that we want to make the appointment process as transparent as possible. So we're happy to take this recommendation back to the rest of the transition team as we work through that process. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. We have a question here around a comment period. Thank you for the League of Women Voters for this. And it's a little bit long, so I'm going to read the entire thing. So while this listening, and it's also some feedback for us this evening. While this listening session is an improvement over the 7.7 session that was held last month, because of the draft proposal was made available in advance. This format only allows for questions or concerns to be raised in the chat. We are also taking comments and feedback as well, so thank you. Therefore, the League of Women Voters was requesting a comment period of 2 weeks on the drafted Code 3.02 proposal after tonight's session. So be consistent around the process used to gather input in the draft race choice voting code to advance what was presented to City Council. The League is requesting this comment period also be applicable to the city organization, which is a separate process, and we'll pass that feedback along. The draft proposal should be released with a comment period. That way comments could inform Michael Jordan's final proposal, and I will have to forward that to the city, that ask and request to the city organization team. It's not what we, no, we do not have those experts in the room this evening. So I will follow up with you as well. I know that I saw I have the attendees for this evening as well. So I wanted to ask Tate if there's a way for folks, is there an official comment period? How can folks who want to read the draft of this proposal maybe think about it for a bit longer and then give feedback?
And yet, Diana, if you're able to show that last slide that we didn't quite get to about how to stay engaged, but it's also about how to submit further comment, which we encourage and welcome. So definitely feel free to review further and submit more comments over the next 2 weeks. That's fantastic. And so again, you can email the transition team. You can always provide verbal input to 311 if that's what you prefer, and they will provide that to us. And then there's also an opportunity to provide public testimony to City Council. The first reading for this is September 20th. So we are, well within, we have more than 2 weeks for that. But yes, please provide comments to us about your thoughts. We will be meeting with GTAC. It's a pretty quick schedule because there's so much going on, but we're meeting with them on Monday. So it'd be great to have comments before then, but totally understand if you need more time, and we're always here to receive those comments for sure.
Okay, so to clarify for folks, the meeting that is happening at City Council on September 20th is not to vote on the final recommendation. It is to hear the recommendation and allow the public to give public comment at that time and recommendations moving forward. Okay, do I have that right?
Yes, I think if we want to be able to incorporate any advice on how to change the draft 3.02, we really would love to have that probably by the 20th of this month, so that we have time to incorporate it, because it's actually due to council on the 26th. And so we want to have time to be able to incorporate that. But that doesn't mean you can't also provide input on the final version that goes to council on the 20th up until the council meeting. That's entirely welcome within the process. So I hope that helps.
And if there are follow-up questions to that, feel free to put that in the Q&A, and we'll get to that in a few, probably as we go through the questions this evening. We have a question from Samantha. Have you considered how committee members might be removed or reshuffled? Also, how will the subjects of committees, so we'll be forming additional committees as the council likes. How will those subjects be determined?
So that is part of the choice that we are leaving to the full council to determine what committees they would like to break themselves out into. In addition, the full council can determine the membership, including who is the chair of each of those committees. But more detail on that is part of what we want to work through in the phase 2. And that's what we really want input from the community on. How best should committees serve the community at large and council's process for creating public policy. So any advice or recommendations on that, we would love to continue working with the GTAC and with the community at large on that. Thank you. I don't know if there's anything else, Tate, you want to add to that.
No, that was fantastic. Yeah, the point about thinking about, reshuffling committee members and everything, I think that's exactly what phase 2 is meant to explore. So that's great.
Okay, we have a question from Debbie here. What did we find? And this is thinking about all of the research and sort of past work that we've done, thinking about city code and procedures. What did you find in other cities about how often the mayor is present at city council meetings?
So in my research, if it's not a strong mayor form of government, which we are not, the mayor doesn't actually attend council particularly often. They come to do things like the annual state of the city, or they come to discuss their budget priorities, or they come if council requests them to give a presentation on the financial well-being of the city. But they don't actually attend very many of the meetings. It is more common that the city administrator or city manager, if that's the form of government, it's more common that they attend on a frequent basis. And that way there's a good communication between the council and the executive branch via the city administrator, but not often the mayor. And hopefully we can continue to come up with processes for when the mayor attends, and that's part of additional phase 2 recommendations as well.
Okay, we have a question, and I'm repeating the and the comment deadlines that we have for Code 3.02. Again, what is the effective deadline for submitting written comments to staff on Code 3.02? And then will GTAC have the option of further considering 3.02 procedures or proposals, pardon me, after August 14th?
So again, for submitting written comments to staff on 3.02, we would love to have them by August 20th so that we can incorporate any changes to that before it gets submitted for the final consideration for council. As far as GTAC, after the 14th, I don't know that it's on their schedule at all to reconsider 3.02. However, we do really want to engage the GTAC on all of the phase 2 work throughout the next year. So they will have plenty of opportunities to advise us on the policy things that are not specifically in 3.02. Do you have anything else, Tate?
No, that sounds great. Thank you.
Okay, this is a separate question around council procedure from when. Do the rules allow, does our current city code that we adopted, do those rules allow for removing president or the council president, or if they appoint a council vice president during their terms?
I want to make sure I understand the question. Sorry, are you able to read it, Diana?
Do the rules allow for removing the president or vice president during their terms? I believe that a supermajority of council can remove the president or council president from their role. That is something I need to actually confirm. I do not actually know if I know that off the top of my head, considering how many times I've read 3.02. I think I'd know it. I'll confirm and get back to you, Wynn.
Yeah.
Great. When I'm taking your question down and we will respond to you tomorrow. I'm going to hit dot on that question, but note that I am putting it in my questions to follow up with individuals on. Okay. Okay, we have an additional question from Wynn in code 3.02.020B3. Your draft says the president has the discretion to ensure when an item is complete. Does that mean that the council president has the power to determine when an item is complete?
Correct. So this is like maybe a little too inside baseball here. When an item is submitted for a council agenda, currently each of the council offices, commission offices, do a final approval to make sure that it has everything necessary before it gets submitted to the council clerk's office for posting on an agenda. And we're proposing that that is the president's role now to make sure that, or his office role, to ensure, I should say their office role, to ensure that the items are completed. This does also mean that they have some control over what shows up on an agenda at what time. And hopefully that doesn't cause too many problems. But again, we have the ability for council to put something on a future agenda by a vote of the majority. Is that clear in that, Tate? You might want to cover.
No, I think you were great.
This question is from Fred. If counselors initially need to meet only 2 times a month, is there a reason for their principal offices, include for staff, need to be in City Hall or downtown, as opposed to situated in their representative districts? And this is a question outside of the scope of this evening, but wanted to bring that, and also, yeah, wanted to bring that forward over where we are in the sort of the offices section of this work.
Yeah, and I can take that one. This is Tate White again. So yes, it's a minimum of 2 meetings per month, and the assumption would be that it would be more, and those meetings would be downtown. And the current focus for facilities planning is expanding the existing council chambers to accommodate that, and also working on those downtown workspaces. And so we are, delaying any decisions about potential district offices to the future council to have a little more engagement on that topic. But I will say that the idea is that the counselors would be out in their communities and would be very present in those districts and attending community events. And hopefully that is going to be a huge focus of their whole time in office, but especially in the beginning there. Thank you for the question.
Okay, we have a question more specific to the charter overall from Janice. Where do we see the charter authority to allow the mayor to join with the councilors with 6 councilors to request a special meeting? After all, the charter clearly says the mayor is not a member of council. We talk more about the mayor joining with 6 councilors to request a council meeting and where that is, and the thinking around that.
Sure. Thank you, Janice. That's an excellent question. So we have interpreted the fact that the mayor has equal ability to put something on an agenda as a council member, to also speak to the ability of them to join in with the council in requesting a special meeting if necessary. So because they have equal authority as the council, we want to be able to have equal authority to request a special meeting.
Great, thank you so much, Jana. We have a follow-up on a previous question. So thank you, Terry, for putting that follow-up question in the Q&A. Our staffing and candidate education rationales if the staffing and candidate education rationales are highly dependent on how the committee is going to work. We talk which we're not going to decide until later. So what is the connection between the decisions now, staffing conversations, and Terry, if I'm misconstruing the question, please again, feel free to ask another follow-up. And sort of the committee relationships. What are we deciding now? What are we bringing in terms of why we're moving committee decisions to the new council? If I have that right.
Sure. Do you want to grab that, Tater? Do you want me to? I'm happy either.
I can try, but you can add on as well. So if I'm tracking, so right now, I guess I don't want to be repetitive, but right now we're really focused on that core structure and assigning kind of those core duties so council can operate. We know that committees are going to be hugely important for this legislative council, and there are a lot of potential decisions to be made on that we just want to provide more time to explore what's possible and make kind of our best recommendations based on the research, our continued thinking on it, our continued discussions with the community and GTAC. We want to provide that space and time, document that work, do that analysis to make those recommendations to the new council, because we really think they're walking into these roles knowing that they're going to be focused on setting policy and really focusing on policy priorities to achieve desired community outcomes. So it really seems like the people that are walking into those roles and are really passionate about those roles should be the ones to make those decisions. And so this is part of what we see as kind of a natural process that will lead to successful outcomes for that new council. I hope that was helpful. Diana, please add.
We've also been advised by other cities and by the International City County Managers Association to set up the base processes for council early, but to allow council to spend a lot of time as a whole council determining their path forward when it comes to committees and commissions. That having those things predetermined oftentimes leads to conflict amongst council and not the ability for them to work as a whole. And given that they are going to be starting their terms and walking almost immediately into a budget process, we really wanted to allow them the ability to have a base process in place for them to deal with each other and get work done before they self-determine their committees for the future. Hope that helps.
I also just wanted to read, this is a comment from Wynn. I wanted to read it out this evening. If anyone else has other comments or questions, feel free to continue adding them into the chat for our conversation tonight. If you think of a question that you really wanted to ask this evening, or a comment or feedback, again, feel free to reach out to us at transition@portlandoregon.gov. Tonight is not the only, this is the first evening is not the only evening where we take questions either on our work on the transition. I wanted to read Wynn's comment. Your discussion of why this matters is going to council now is a compelling argument for presenting these items to council, but much less for adopting these rules now. Without more public discussion and committee analysis of the issues involved. I too have watched all meetings and do not recall much group analysis. So thank you so much for your comment, Wynn. Okay, moving to the next question. This is a question from Destiny. Could the transition team and GTAC establish a communication link between council, focus on, pardon my reading this evening, I'm going to start over for clarity. Could the transition team and GTAC really focus on establishing a communication link between council, the mayor, and city administrator? Especially want to highlight if councilors need downtown offices, they should be serving their districts a majority and meeting a minimum of 3 times to serve the city. Question is could the GTAC transition on it? Are there other ways for folks to get involved on establishing the communication link between council, mayor, and city administrator?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I will take that back. I'm not clear on the scope of how we were planning to engage GTAC on those issues. So definitely hear that. And it's great to know what you are most interested in. So I'll definitely take that back and we can talk about that more next week.
Great, thank you. We have a comment here from Pamela that I'd like to read as well this evening. This seems like too much additional power is being accrued to what the charter said about the duties of the president of the council. Thank you so much for that comment, Pamela. Then we have another question, and I will say that this is the last question I currently have in my queue. If there are other questions, got another, thank you. If there are other questions that folks are thinking of, please feel free to write those in the question and answer box, or provide comment that we can read to the team this evening for the record. Or provide comment, sorry, that we can read out loud this evening. Is there a minimum attendance policy for those council meetings out in the community? And I'll add on to there about council meetings in general.
So there currently isn't a minimum attendance policy that that is something that we certainly could consider recommending in the second phase, if that's something that GTAC and the community have interest in. And as far as the committee, or sorry, the counselors spending time out in community, the intention of them being out there, there isn't like an attendance policy or a requirement for that, other than we presume that they will not get reelected if they are not spending time in community. But I do like the idea of having an attendance policy for council meetings as a consideration. Thank you.
We do have another follow-up question here. If there is an urgency, thank you, Terry, by the way, if there's an urgency to the new council to deal with the budget and not committees, then wouldn't a revised budget process be important now, or a budget subcommittee, for example, be a priority?
Did I hear a revised budget process? Is that what was
Yes.
included in the question? Yeah, so currently we are working with our partners at the budget office to make sure we are using this as an opportunity to reconsider our budget process and kind of think of any improvements that might be made on that. That is mostly an internal conversation related to process improvement, but in consideration of all the changes that are happening. I think it's a great point. Yes, we've had discussions about we need a committee focused on things like the budget conversation. I think based on the advice we've been given, it's really great that the counselors are meeting all together to start to get to know each other and develop working relationships, both within their district, but also across the city council. And we're really going to want all the city councilors to learn about the budget and be making those budget decisions together. That's kind of my initial take on that. I will say, I think a great opportunity that we're going to be exploring more is having a series of work sessions for this council as well, so they can get to know, what the budget process is and what their different options are related to that. But it's a fantastic comment, and that's definitely the kind of thing we want to discuss more in phase 2.
Great, thank you. And this is a comment from Debbie. Just a comment, in addition to full council meetings, there will be committee meetings that involve counselors from each district. So other meetings will probably occur downtown. So thank you for that comment, Debbie.
Thank you.
Especially as a former Charter Commission member. We appreciate that, Debbie. Thank you so much.
Okay. Double checking the questions here, leaving space for folks to continue to add comments, continue to add questions in the question and answer section of the comment boxes. Please feel free to do that. I'm just going to reorient myself with the questions. Things have been moving quickly in the last few minutes. Okay, reading this one. Okay, we have a question again around the request of the special meeting with the mayor and councilors. Just framing that for a moment. Thank you to the anonymous attendee for these questions. The mayor, with regard to the mayor having a role in request of a special meeting, we're equating that the mayor be able to propose an agenda item. A special meeting can be on topics like the mayor has not proposed. So this equating rationale seems to be problematic. Even if this equating rationale is valid, is this provision, the question is this, even if this equating rationale is valid, is this provision related to special meetings found in other jurisdictions? Or is there some reason that letting the mayor do this seems essential?
That's an excellent question. And one we probably want to consider and have more discussion with the GTAC next week about, because we we're basing the ability of the mayor to put something on agenda, both on their ability to be equal to council in that. And also that it's in our current 3.02 code, and maybe we need to question that assumption a little bit more. So I'm happy to get advice from our city attorney on why they felt this was essential, and we can bring this to GTAC for further discussion next week. Thank you.
Well, and just to clarify, again, it's the charter that establishes that the mayor has the same authority as other councilors to place items on the council agenda. And yeah, my understanding is that the Charter Commission really wanted to make sure there was some balance, and that, you know, if the mayor's hearing from constituents or there are administrative issues that need some policy attention from council, I would assume that that is an option. It's one way for the mayor to bring council's attention to any major, you know, administrative issues that are not under the council's purview, but might require some high level kind of policy changes that are under the council's purview to make an adjustment.
Thank you. And a reminder to this attendee, if there are additional comments you'd like to send about this, please feel free to send them to transition@portlandoregon.gov. Thank you so much for that comment this evening. We have a question from Wynn, and I'm not sure we have the legal expertise to answer this, but I'm going to throw it out. I'm going to put it out there for us this evening to see if we have the knowledge around this. This is a question from Wynn, and I'm taking this down in case we do not have an answer immediately this evening. Does Oregon law allow a prohibition on personal criticism? Again, this is a bit outside of our code conversation this evening, but I'm super curious if we know the answer to this. Does Oregon law allow a prohibition on personal criticism, assuming it's about performance of public duties and not something personal like cooking ability, for example?
Yeah, we could definitely take that back. Is that personal criticism of counselors, of who's doing the criticizing of whom, I guess would be my clarifying question. And apologies, a reminder, I'm on my phone because my computer decided to not work. So I'm not reading these as easily.
And when I will go back to you just because we'll get some clarification on that, and then see if we can check on that response for you. So
I think Wynn said in the, she just posted,
oh, okay.
It is in your draft. So if it's in our draft, then it must be something from the city attorney's office following their request, because it wasn't a policy decision that we made. But we will confirm that and put the response to that on our website, because I don't know legally where they got that from. Thank you.
Thank you for putting that clarification in, Wynn, and we will reach back out to you. I have that comment. Your question noted. We will reach back out to you around that. Okay, we have a additional question from Wynn. What is intended by the rule that the council president shall have the duty to serve as primary point of contact with the mayor? When is assuming that it's not her prohibition on other city councilors meeting with the mayor individually or in group discussions that don't violate public meeting laws. But what is intended by the rule that the council president shall have the duty to serve as the primary point of contact with the mayor?
Sure, thank you. That's an excellent question. So it's intended for those instances, like for example, if council has a tie, needs to invite the mayor back to break that tie, we would like to have one person, the council president, be the person who's contacting the mayor, rather than having somebody else think that it was somebody else's responsibility and nobody ended up inviting them to attend. And there's also going to be cases where council will approve something, but it has to, maybe further details need to be given to the mayor for clarification. And so we want to make sure that the council president has that responsibility to be that conduit between the two branches to the degree that's possible. Does that help?
Hmm.
Do you have anything else to add to that, Tate?
Yeah, and I think in our various discussions with, subject matter experts that we've been talking with, both external and internal to the city, I think it's been recommended that there just be a clear person for the mayor to be able to go to, and just providing, some level of accountability for them to be working together and collaborating and talking to each other. It's not meant to mean that the other counselors can't talk to the mayor and develop relationships as well. It's just making sure there is a primary point of contact for sure.
And I will say there is an additional question from Janice. It's a follow-up to that, so I'll
Mhm.
read it out. How common is it in other communities that a council president is the primary point of contact with leaders in the administrative branch? It's pretty common. It's written in a lot of council rules, and a lot of cities' code is that the president takes on that responsibility. So it's not uncommon for us to be suggesting that. Thank you, Janice.
Great, moving to a comment from Wynn, not a question. And thank you for the appreciations, Wynn, for answering our questions this evening. We appreciate you for asking these questions, and everyone this evening for asking questions, whether that's this evening or whether that's later, as you think through and look through Code 3.02. A comment, not a question. It is important for the mayor to be able to bring items before the council as provided in the charter. It is also important for the president to be able to manage, subject to the approval of their colleagues, the council's overall agenda and workflows, which should suggest that the I'm assuming this is a part of the question. It's the power to which suggests, and then unfortunately it cut off their Win. But if you have additional comments that you'd like to add in, feel free to send those along. And then we have a comment from an anonymous attendee around the power to set the special meeting should stay with the president. So thank you for that comment, anonymous attendee.
Can I actually speak to that a little bit?
Sure.
We were a little concerned about having only one person be able to hold a special meeting, in that if there is an instance in which the council president is unable to fulfill their duties for some reason, we would like to have other options for people to be able to call special meetings. And so that's why we have multiple ways for a special meeting to be called. That's why we also have multiple ways for an emergency meeting to be called, so that there's not one potential point of failure in there if should something occur to the council president. So, but thank you for your comment.
And this is also a comment having to do with that sort of from Pamela. Please remember that this president of the council is not elected citywide. Some of the powers and duties you are giving to this position seem rife for potential power plays and not collaboration. Have you thought about how to facilitate collaboration and not competition?
Yeah, it's a great comment. I think we took it out. We had it in an original slide, and I think we took it out. We are trying to balance the power across these in suggesting things like the president and the vice president should be from different districts, or and these are some of the considerations we would like to suggest to council. We would like to suggest that when a committee is created, that there is a representative from each district. We also want to make sure that the council, the full body of the council, has the ability to alter agendas or place things on agendas to override the rule of the president. So we've been thinking about ways to balance that power, but we would love to have it be an ongoing conversation with GTAC, other ways to balance that authority across both a district base and the authority of the president. So any other suggestions for that would be great.
Okay. Oh, Wynn, that was you. Okay, thank you. Okay. In terms of this is a separate question outside of Code 3.02 from Fred around how we analyze what staff the entire council will require in addition to the auditor's duty, like assisting the council president in the sort of conversation.
So we've spent a lot of time thinking about what staffing levels might be necessary for each council member, for shared staff, if there are additional needs for the council president. We haven't 100% settled on all of those. Those are ongoing conversations, but we certainly are taking into consideration all of the potential needs there.
Yep.
If you have recommendations, please let us know. Tate probably can fill in additional comments.
What the process we've been taking is it's talking to existing commissioner offices and the mayor's office to understand the current services that are provided by their supporting staff to support them. And then also recognizing that there will be additional and sometimes changed services in this new form of government based on these shifting roles and responsibilities. So that's informing our analysis to be able to be aware of what the service needs are to support these leaders, but also understanding the different levels of services they will require to help actually understand adequate staffing levels and what we're proposing. So thank you. It's a great question, comment.
And the last two questions that we have are actually comments this evening. Oh, we may be getting some more in because I was going to leave a few moments. Thank you for continuing to submit comments and questions. Two of the comments we have are just a thank you for the information tonight. And a thank you to all the attendees for the great questions and conversation for this evening. So thank you for attending this evening. Thank you for your questions. Again, if you have additional questions, feel free to contact us either through the City of Portland Transition website at portland.gov/transition, where we post all of our information. You'll be able to see this recording tomorrow. If you go to events and then past meetings, we'll try to get those slide decks and uploads up there. If you can't find anything for some reason or have a question or comment after this meeting, feel free to reach out to us at transition@portlandoregon.gov. We're happy to continue the conversation after this work, after our Q&A this evening, and answer questions overall around the transition. I'm going to reread some of the questions here and reorient myself as folks are continuing to say thank you to the panelists this evening. Thank you again to all of our attendees this evening for all of your questions. Thank you for the presentation tonight and answering our questions. We do have a question going back, and thank you for those appreciations. We do appreciate those. Going back, we do have another question that is popping up. Again, thank you for this robust discussion this evening. Going back to the role of the mayor in requesting a special meeting. It looks like the current code includes the mayor because that person is a member of the council currently. This doesn't seem to be support allowing the new mayor to play that role, since that person will not be a member of the council. A clear delineation between the administrative branch and council is a key element of the measure that was passed this last fall, measure 26-228, which is contributing to the raising of this concern. So thank you for raising that concern, Janice. Thank you for that comment. We greatly appreciate it. I am going to pause here for a moment because I'm not seeing any more questions. I'm not seeing any more appreciations right now. So I'm going to give us that awkward 15 or 20 seconds to give folks that time. If you were thinking about something and you're like, oh, I really wanted to ask Tate or Diana or anyone else this evening a question. Was there a reminder of something that you wanted to make sure that we left on? Was there anything else? I'm going to give folks a quick moment while I clear those appreciations. Thank you so much for sending those along and the comment from Janice. I'm going to give folks a quick moment. Let's enjoy the awkward silence together. Because of our wonderful awkward silence together, we do have one last comment and question. This is why we sit in silence for that 15 or 20 seconds. To follow up on Fred's question, will the staffing structure be established prior to the September 20th council meeting where Code 3.02 is being done? Or where will folks be able to see that staffing structure conversation and be able to, where will folks expect to see that?
So because we need to start informing the budget process for the fiscal year 2024 to 2025, as soon as this fall, we're having to start putting those plans in place now. We're trying to make them very flexible. I've talked about the services catalog that we're working on to understand service needs and level of service and make a recommendation to the Chief Administrative Officer, Michael Jordan. And he will take those recommendations and that analysis by staff to recommend staffing levels to City Council for their October decision. So it's not going to be a part of the September decision, but it's going to input into other elements of the transition.
Great, thank you for that clarification for folks. I am putting some reminders in the chat about where you could find our email updates if you are not already on our transition team emails. If you'd like to ask a question or provide additional comment on our feedback form online, I've put both of those links in. Diana, I don't see any other questions. So was there an additional sort of slide that we had around that? And then I will continue to sort of post in the chat how folks can continue to engage, or should I just take it from here as I post a bazillion comments about how folks can stay in touch?
I think you've posted everything in there. We have hit all of our slides. So we are done with the presentation side of things. I really appreciate the comments and the questions that community has had, and really hope that you continue to provide us with input on this, not only just for the 3.02 that we'll be taking on September 20th, but for the additional recommendations that we will be developing to send to council after September 20th. So continue to be engaged, continue to give us your thoughts and concerns and questions. We love them and appreciate them greatly. So I really appreciate your time here. Thank you. Tate,
Yeah.
you wanna?
Thank
Okay,
you.
so I will wrap
great.
us up again. Thank you so much for everyone attending. I've posted a few things in the chat around signing up for our monthly transition team emails if you are not on that list. We are happy to sign you up by either emailing us or you could sign up yourself. Thank you again to everyone for attending this evening. If you think of something, a question tomorrow, a question on Friday, as you reflect on the conversation this evening, feel free to send public comment or additional questions to transition@portlandoregon.gov. You can also give, if you don't feel like opening your email, feel free to go to our website at portlandoregon.gov/transition. And you can fill out an online comment form, and we're happy to communicate with you through our online portal in that way. A reminder that the Code 3.02 conversation will continue at the Government Transition Advisory Committee meeting on August 14th from 6 to 8 p.m. I've put the event link. You can feel free to attend that meeting virtually, or we hold that meeting in person, typically in the Portland building in room 100 on the first floor. You can also give additional public comment around the transition work at the GTAC meetings, and you can sign up to give public comment. And I put that link in the note there. Thank you again for everyone attending this evening. Thank you so much for your comments, for your questions, and I hope you have a wonderful evening and a great rest of your week. And with that, I believe we will end the webinar. Thank you again for everyone attending tonight.